Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing great out there. Did you guys have time to hear about the Karmelo Anthony verdict and what they gave this young guy who was 19 years old, who was basically accused of first degree unaliving of another high school player? I don't think they went to the same school, but it was a situation where it was raining one day and Karmelo Anthony was at a track meet and he got under a canopy that was, I guess, from a different school. I don't know if it was the school of, the other kid, um, Austin Metcalf. I guess he felt like Carmelo shouldn't have been got under the canopy because he didn't go there. And actually, that's what he stated, that he shouldn't have been under the canopy. But it was raining, and from what I hear, another student told Carmelo that he can come and stand under the canopy. And it doesn't matter. That doesn't even matter at all. The fact of the matter is, you don't have a right to approach someone in a volatile manner, and you definitely don't have a right to put your hands on someone to try to physically remove them from standing under a tent, or even just try to, physically harm them because you feel like you have privilege and that society protects you. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to attack this kid. But what made it so racially charged is the fact that Carmelo Anthony happens to be a black American, teenager, and Austin Metcalf was actually a white kid, and he has a twin brother who was actually present at the same time that this occurred. And supposedly they had two other people with them. So that makes it 4-1. Okay. And all of them were white who were with Austin Metcalf. Okay. And I'm not sure why the Metcalf brothers were there. I guess they were there just to watch the race that was going to take place. And Carmelo Anthony was actually there to participate in it. So I don't know if he was running that day or if he was helping or what was taking place, but he was actually on a team, and he was there. So what ended up happening is, they approached Carmelo, and Carmelo was just basically, he saw the aggression, obviously, because I'm sure they weren't using friendly words towards him. See, and that's another thing I don't understand that was missing in the case. What did they actually say to Carmelo? What was the actual words that they used? What did they say to him? Because I know statements had to have been taken when the incident first occurred. But what ended up happening was Carmelo ended up, poking him with they're saying a knife, but that's also missing. Anytime that there's a case and there's an unaliving that takes place, they have some type of evidence. They show you what was actually used in the situation. That's part of evidence, And where's the video? There's a video of what occurred. And again, that has been removed from the public, because it does seem like if from the very onset of this case, this situation, that they have been making moves to basically protect the Metcalf family, to hide what actually happened. Because if you're the aggressor and you approach someone, you can't be, it cannot be anything but self-defense if you're the one who aggressed this person. Okay, you start hitting this person, what are they supposed to do to get out of the situation? And these guys were much larger than Carmelo. I think they said Carmelo was 130 some pounds. These guys were over 200 pounds, over 6 feet tall. So they were big guys compared to Carmelo. And another part of this case is the fact that, they were saying that Carmelo has epilepsy, which was another part of the case that I don't understand why it was left out, why it was not considered. And Carmelo said he had the knife for that reason, because he has epilepsy. So it must have been used for something, So just in case he had a seizure. And that's what epilepsy is. It's a seizure disorder. And when you have seizures, seizures can be very dangerous. They can actually be life-threatening when you have those. So I don't understand why none of this was even considered, wasn't brought up. And in fact, I read that the jurors were told not to even consider that when they were, going over the facts of the case. They were saying not to consider that he had epilepsy. But it does not matter. This is a self-defense case. That was not a first-degree unaliving at all, because that has to be premeditated. He had to actually be sitting there thinking about contemplating doing this and bringing something to it before it happened. And just because he had so-called a knife, in which people are saying it was something that they used to sharpen their cleats, it was not necessarily a knife, but that's what they said. And they said he brought it too, also just in case he had, a problem with, his health. They didn't really specify the information surrounding, the details surrounding why he needed the knife for that reason. But this is what was stated, from what I hear that was stated. And I saw a portion of a video, and I did see 4 white guys behind Austin Metcalf. Okay, so Austin Metcalf must have been the one who was getting him the most. As far as when it got physical, he must have been over Karmelo Anthony's body. He must have been getting him the most. So, because he did take some blows. I heard fists were flying. Okay, so, it's self-defense all day long. But this young kid, only 19 years old, had a future ahead of him. He had high, grades. He was doing great in school. So that's what he was doing. He was focusing on his education because he had good grades. He was an athlete. He had a life ahead of him. And had these Metcalf brothers just left him alone like he requested, and he did say, if you put your hands on me, then you'll see what happens. My thing is, we say things like that, and it's a cultural thing. You have to know cultural nuances, and those are the things that we say when people try to challenge us to physical harm. That's our way of trying to basically, try to diffuse it to have them to go away, hopefully. But the fact that he said that, and these boys are known bullies, okay? So to them, they felt like, okay, this is a challenge. And Karmelo Anthony happened to be black. And I do think that was the determining factor in why the Metcalf boys became so charged and wanted to, come after him. I also heard, too, that the Metcalf brothers' father have said the N-word. He was caught saying the N-word, and there were some things that identified, his ideology as being anti-black. Because if he said the N-word, that's exactly what he is. Anyone who's outside of the black community who use words like that, you're anti-black. Because you have no right and no business saying it. I don't care if you use saying guh. But the hard R, you're definitely a racist if you're using that, okay, that term. Nobody should be using that term at all towards anyone, anywhere. That is outright racist. And that's the word that black people would hear back in the day before they were unalived. And I'm talking about, basically, on trees, that type of thing. And even worse, even the modern day unaliving like that and strange fruiting is basically the use of power tools, the pew-pews. I believe anytime a black person loses their life, even in the modern day times, I believe that they're called that word before they're unalived, because we still have white supremacists here. We have a system that protects them. And I do believe that's why Karmelo Anthony was charged in this case. And I do believe, how in the heck, where was his defense at? Why didn't Karmelo Anthony's attorney ask for a change of venue? Because he had a lot of reasons why this case should have been moved to another county. First of all, you had a case, you held a trial in a town that's over 60% white, right? Then they let them dismiss. They had 3 black jurors on this trial, and they had these black jurors dismissed, talking about they were educators and things like that. So what does that have to do with anything? They can't be impartial because they're educators? No, they dismissed these women because they were black. I don't care what they say. It was because they were black. And they talking about, well, they had other minority people as jurors on there. Middle Eastern and Asian. That's supposed to make a difference. That's supposed to be equivalent to someone who looks like Carmelo Anthony and who can understand, you know, other things about it, not let their, prejudice get in the way. So it's okay for mostly white jurors to be on that case when you know that they most likely are going to be partial to who? Austin Metcalf, because he lost his life in that. So that's another reason why they were going to be more partial to him. And that Karmelo Anthony was a black kid. He's visibly sitting there and they're looking at him and they're saying he's alive. And the white kid didn't make it. You don't think that they're sitting there thinking like that when they want to deliberate and all this stuff and they're going over all the facts and things like that? You don't think Carmelo Anthony's race was not a determining factor in them basically throwing a book at him, basically saying he'd have a right to protect himself when he's being physically attacked and harmed? And he has epilepsy. If they would have hit Carmelo Anthony the wrong way, or he could have fell down them bleachers, he could have seized. And that could have been the ending of his life. Seizures are nothing to play with. And they left that out. They didn't even want the jurors to even consider that. How can you not consider it when you already know that that's what it is? That could have happened to him. And that's most likely why he felt the need to use something to protect himself. He probably didn't want to have a seizure. And he didn't know what they had on them. He didn't know how far that it would go. It's even when somebody, hits you with their fist, they can still unalive you if they hit you the wrong way. Or if you fall and hit your head. Or anything could happen in situations like that. But just because somebody's not using a tool does not mean that it cannot result in them being unalive. Which is why people go to jail when they fight in public. That's still illegal. It's still misdemeanors. You can still go to jail from fighting in public. It's still something that's against the law. But him having that knife, when Carmelo had the knife and the size it was, that knife was so small, and they said it's not illegal for him to have that knife. And people were saying, well, it said on the sign that you're not supposed to bring weapons or whatever. But what I hear, it was something that he sharpened his cleats with. I heard that it was something other than what they're trying to say that it was. They're trying to make it seem like that Carmelo Anthony went into the kitchen and got a butcher knife from the drawer and took it to that doggone track meet. That's what they're making it sound like. Like it was premeditated. He didn't even know the Metcalf boys like that. So how is it premeditated at that? He was going to a track meet. He wasn't going to get into any type of confrontation with anyone. And just because he had it and pulled it out his bag, he did it in self-defense. And then after he did it, Carmelo Anthony even asked, was Austin okay? Austin Metcalf okay? That's not a monster. Because I guarantee you if it was the other way around, they wouldn't ask if Carmelo Anthony was fine. They were trying to hurt him. They went there to, they wanted to have a problem. And they got one. Unfortunately, it resulted in his life being taken away, but you cannot go and be the bully. And then when something happens, everybody make that person that defended themselves, because that's all it was. Carmelo defended themselves. You can't make them the monster. You can't make them the bully. You can't make them the person who was the aggressor. You can't make them the initiator of the conflict or anything like that. He asked them to leave him alone. Carmelo Anthony asked the Metcalf brothers to leave him alone. And nobody listened to him. And they even brought 2 more people over there. So why did they have to do that? That was already intimidating. To have all these people 4 against 1 person. Those were their friends. There was a Metcalf friends. Those 2 other guys were their friends. And just because Austin lost his life, people want to say that it was wrong. And why didn't Carmelo just run? Who's to say that he could run? Who's to say that, they were pummeling him? They were, they had the advantage. It was 4 of them to get against 1. So what else was he supposed to do? He didn't have a right to defend himself. There's a stand your ground law in Texas. This happened in Texas. They walk around with pew-pews on the side of them like the Wild Wild West over there in Texas. And they have, from what I hear, they carry knives too on them. They have all kind of stuff out in the open on them in Texas. And it doesn't matter. Now, if he violated the school law, then he violated the school law. But they said that he wasn't in the wrong for having that knife. He wasn't. And he only took it out when he felt like he had to defend himself. And he did. If you're harming me, I don't know what you have on you. I don't know how far this is going to go. And then he's probably thinking, I'm black. They harm me. They're going to get away with it. So he had to fight. He was defending himself. Where was all the other people that were there? Where was the security at the event? Where were all these adults that should have stepped in and broke that up? And why was Karmelo Anthony the one that was approached by them to say he couldn't stand under the tent? I doubt if he was the only one under there. Somebody invited him under there, so that meant that there were other students under there. So why did they just approach him? Was he the only black kid over there? Did they know about him? Were they jealous of him? And they were racist too? What was the real deal? Because just because they're young doesn't mean that they're not racist. They have many racist kids because I deal with them all the time. They are racist because they're raised by racist parents and grandparents. So you can save me with that. And their peers are racist. Other racist kids, yeah, they get together and they pick on kids who are different from them. And that's what our kids are going through now, especially with all the things that's happening right now in society in 2026. Yes, it's a lot going on. And, it's a shame that Karmelo Anthony had a future ahead of him and he had to even endure this. But I don't understand what type of representation he had. Why didn't they use all of this? Like I said, why didn't they ask for a change of venue? Because for one thing, there was already too much bias, hostility in the current county that they were in. And it was no way he was going to get a fair trial because too many people knew about it. This was a high profile case that everybody talked about. And you're going to have the case tried in a town that it happened in when everybody had already talked about it. This happened like 2 years prior. So that's enough time for people to talk about things, for people to, develop whether or not he was guilty or whatever before hearing the facts of the case. But I'm a person on the outside looking in, and I'm listening to it, seeing things, and I'm telling you, I don't know the Karmelo Anthony family. I don't know the Metcalf family. But my thing is, I'm speaking from like a person who was chosen to be on the jury. And according to what I'm hearing, this is outright self-defense. This is not a first-degree unaliving situation at all. It's not, because it's not premeditation there. And if it doesn't fit the definition of a first-degree unaliving, if it doesn't fit the definition of a premeditated crime, then that's not what it was. That is not at all what it was, because his, what they say, weapon was kept in the bag until he felt like he was facing an imminent threat, that they were harming him. That's when he went in his bag and took it out, which is not unreasonable when you're trying to protect yourself. You told them to leave you alone, and they persisted to mess with him. They didn't even care because they were known bullies. And what I hear that Austin, he had anger issues, and he was always in some type of trouble, because of the things that he did. He was a known bully, and his brother. So, and it sounds like it was some little racial, things that was going on with that as well. Because like I said, I still want to know, why did they target Karmelo Anthony? What was the determining factor in why he was targeted? And this is another thing. Why didn't they speak to Austin Metcalf's brother? Why didn't they speak to him? They said that the prosecution team decided not to bring his brother. He was right there next to his brother when the incident occurred. He knows exactly what happened. But they said that they weren't allowed to cross-examine him. They didn't let him take the stand. He most definitely should have taken the stand. Yes, he should have. And I just don't understand why they didn't have him do it. Then they had like 23 witnesses. Even some of Karmelo Anthony's friends went against him. That didn't sound right. And they said in the courtroom, the father of Austin, Jeff Metcalf, was basically coaching the witnesses on the stand. They would, when they answer questions, they were looking over at him, and he would give gestures and things. That's not fair. And that is, you're leading the witness. That's witness tampering. You cannot do that in the court of law. You're not supposed to do that. And they should have had that witness removed, and they should have had his father removed. He should not have been allowed to do that. They should have had him held him in contempt or something. You cannot do things like that. And that's the reason why that case needed to be moved somewhere else where nobody knew anybody, and that all that pressure wasn't there, and it's just like it just seemed like it was a lot of bias going on with that case. And I don't understand what defense team would allow them to release 3 black jurors, not have his brother put on the stand, not even they should have cross-examined the witnesses. Their statements should have been challenged, and they didn't even challenge that. That defense team didn't even defend Karmelo Anthony. They shouldn't have been called. I mean, they just what kind of, you can't even call it that a defense. What was that? That was absolutely horrible. I'm not an attorney. I could have sat there and did the job that defense attorney did. He didn't do anything. And nobody knows as of now what the closing arguments were even. This case only lasted 4 days, you guys. 4 days. They rushed this case through. It was too much going on. This was a high-profile case. It's been sitting on the shelf for 2 years. And it's a lot that's happened in that case. Why was it pushed so fast? I've never heard of a case being decided in 4 days. And not only that, they even gave him his sentencing in the same day. He was convicted and sentenced in the same day. What does that happen at? So they were in expedient. They were being very expedient with prosecuting Karmelo Anthony. And it just seemed like it was just a railroad. It just seemed like he was set up. This sounds like a setup if I ever heard of one. And I don't understand why his parents did not fire that attorney. I would have fired him so fast. I hope they got their money back. I hope they going after those fees, because I know they paid dearly for this attorney who didn't do anything for their child. And now they're going to have to file an appeal. They should have had that appeal. I'm telling you, the way the case was even going from the very onset, I would have had an appeal process going on before that case was even decided upon, because you can just tell what direction it was going in. You saw Karmelo Anthony's face in that courtroom. You can just tell he even felt that. He looked so sad. I mean, he is just stressed out. You can just tell. And I think it's really sad. He didn't go to no event thinking that he would be in a situation that he was in that courtroom yesterday. And now they gave him 35 years. They gave Karmelo Anthony 35 years for self-defense, for defending himself. It's unfortunate that it had to result, how it resulted. But if you're defending yourself and you see no other out, then what are you supposed to do? And they said right after it happened, he ran down the bleachers and went on the field, and he was just distraught, because you can tell he's not a monster. He didn't even want to do that. He was only 17 years old. Now, both of them are kids, and nobody's looking at it from that standpoint. Look at a child's mental. They could even had that argued in the courtroom. Why didn't they have an expert psychologist or somebody to come out there and talk about it? Why did they have to have somebody come out from the police department and say that he wasn't really at fault for having, the tool that he had, the knife or whatever they said it was, that he was not at fault for having that? They said that's not even against the law to have those. Everybody has little switchblades. That's probably what it was, or something like that. They have those. People carry those around in Texas all the time. That is nothing new. That is not out of order. But then on the other hand, there was a case where it involved another, high school kids, where one guy, Allison, he was a white kid, and the other one was Ramirez. Of course, he's Latin by his name. And they had some type of confrontation, and Allison asked to meet him in the bathroom. And Allison came to the bathroom school fight with a knife, and he unalived him and stuck him multiple times. But guess what? Allison either I remember that case. I believe he got just probation or something like that. And they gave him a bail or something. It's something like that. I don't know. You can't have a bail unless you're convicted usually, but I'm just saying it was something to the fact. Somebody said they charged him with manslaughter. I don't know about that. Because I remember him being released. I remember something like that. But they didn't do anything. And it was very similar to the Karmelo Anthony case. And I don't understand why Karmelo Anthony got first degree. That is no way. Man, I hope they are filing an appeal expediently. Hurry up and file that appeal. But there is no way that was on the first degree. That's not. And like I said, they should have had to ask for a change of venue because of how everything was going. It seemed like the judge was biased because he kept letting them have their way. There's no way they should have had those three black jurors, excused. Why did they have them excused? Everything just, and that's what makes everything so racial to me. They can say it's not racist if they want to. Everything about this case was race. And then you have all these white supremacists coming after black people on social media. Anytime you speak about this case, they just come back. They try to antagonize you. They're making fun of Karmelo Anthony because he was, charged. That doesn't mean that they don't have a appeal process, and I will fire that attorney. I hope his family's not using that same attorney they used during the trial. Please get you another attorney and get somebody who looks like Karmelo Anthony. Okay, get somebody like that. Because it just seems like you have to find somebody who's good at what they do, who's not going to railroad you when they take your money and say they're going to work for you. And then when they get in these courtrooms, but you can fire people too as well. You have a right to fire people. If they're not going the way that you want them to go, you have a right to dismiss them. You need to have even other attorneys sitting on standby. So if that goes awry, you can just pull somebody else up. I mean, because this is your child's life. That's pretty much life. 35 years? That is no way. What would he be in his 50s when he get out of prison? Karmelo Anthony be 50-some years old. And that's what I'm saying. Our kids, what are they supposed to do? They supposed to sit there and just take beatings from white kids? Because if they defend themselves, like I said, even fighting fist to fist can result in somebody being unalive. If you hit them the wrong way or they fall, they have health conditions like Karmelo, having epilepsy. They can go on a seize, and that can be the end of them. So I'm just saying, just because you fight fist to fist don't mean that somebody can't lose their life. Okay? That don't mean they can suffer great bodily harm. It happens all the time. I don't know why people say, well, if you fight fist to fist. No, things can happen to people even when they do that. It's dangerous. But my thing is, why didn't the Metcalf boys leave Karmelo alone? People have a right to be left alone. They have a right not for anybody to assault them. They have a right for people not to assault them. And the stuff these are white adults too on these platforms talking negatively about a kid. A kid. And you wonder why these kids are going around on these school campuses harassing black students, targeting black students, assaulting black students. But I blame the personnel that's there, the teachers and all that. Why do they always seem like they allow non-black kids to target black students and don't do anything? They never do anything. Seem like they do anything. But let a black kid bully one of them or do something to them, then they'll get all kind of disciplinary actions against them. They will get expelled, all expulsions, suspensions, and everything. Not be able to graduate, not be able to participate in certain things. If they're seniors, if they want to go to the prom, they'll tell them they can't come to that. All kind of stuff. If they did it, they'll have them in juvie. So I'm just saying, it's just crazy. This system is so unfair, and it is a hit towards the black community. It is a hit because Karmelo is a black person. He's a black young kid. He's just 19 years old, and he has to go through this and had a life ahead of him. And if they hadn't messed with him, he wouldn't even be in a situation. But you guys tell me what you think about this sentencing and how his defense basically worked for him. What do you think that was about? Do you think Karmelo was actually set up? And why did his parents intervene and just fire these people when they saw how they were not actually defending him? Because a motion should have been filed for these people, for this case to be moved to another county. I believe that was the best bet, to even have that judge removed, because that judge didn't sound right either. And from what I hear, there's rumors going around saying that they all know each other, that the Metcalf father, Jeff, the Judge Roach, and the DA, that all of them supposedly know one another. So I don't know how true it is, but that's what is being said. They had this picture circulating saying that Judge Roach was in the picture, which he was not. They said the DA was in the picture, which he was not. I saw the picture, and he's not in either of those pictures. But I wonder why are they saying that they know each other. I wouldn't be surprised. Nothing surprises me anymore about what people do. I don't trust many people at all, and it doesn't, because if you think about it, the judge and DA, they both work for the state. They both work for the same entity pretty much, and they do know each other because they're in court regularly, so they know each other. It's just, and they do give, a lot of times they give them preferential treatment. That's why your defense has to be stellar. I'm telling you, you have to have a good defense team in order to get you out of any type of trouble or railroading when they're trying to do you like that, especially when you're a black person. And you have to have a judge who understands black nuances and the things that we go through in this country, because those are very good things to bring up in cases like this. This was definitely a racially charged case, and it was basically about race. It was. Why did they even target Carmelo? Why is the system allowing him to go down like that? And he's a young kid, and they know it was self-defense. So it's just, you guys tell me what you think. And I think it's just so sad. His parents left out, I'm sure they were, emotion ain't the word. But they said Carmelo just started crying in the courtroom. It was just horrible. It was horrible. But you guys, please tell me what you think in the comment section. Share my video. And you guys, please be vigilant out there and be very careful. And everyone, please don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And have a nice day out there. Bye, everyone.